we're starting to get more information from Kamala Harris's forthcoming memoir, 107 Days, about her time as the presidential candidate in 2024. And there is something about who she wanted to pick as VP, vice president, that I think is very worth your time, because I think it's revealing about Harris, and it's why I'm skeptical Harris is going to be the 2028 Democratic presidential nominee. All right, let's start with what she said. So Jonathan Lemire at The Atlantic got a look at least some of her memoir. And in what he saw, he quotes Harris about her preferred vice presidential pick, not Tim Walz, who she picked, not Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who I think she should have picked, but Department of Transportation head Pete Buttigieg. Yes, Mayor Pete. Here's what she said about Buttigieg. He, quote, would have been an ideal partner if I were a straight white man. She then adds, quoting her, but we were already asking a lot of America to accept a woman married to a Jewish man. Part of me wanted to say, screw it, let's just do it. But knowing what was at stake, it was too big of a risk. And I think Pete also knew that, to our mutual sadness. Now, there's a lot there. We know that Buttigieg was not in Harris's final three. We believe it was Shapiro, definitely, and Walz, but not Buttigieg. And in the excerpt quoted there in The Atlantic, basically she eliminates him from her final list, Buttigieg, from her final list for that exact reason, that she just doesn't think America is ready for a gay man and a black woman as the nominees. Now, I'm going to explain why I think that actually is Harris's problem in a second. But before I do that, let me do this first. Before I do that, let me quickly make a pitch to you, which is become a subscriber. 2 words: independent, authentic. Independent, always telling you what I think, not owned by big media, not controlled by other political party. Authentic, not in the business of fan service. Just gonna give you my straight up opinion, my straight up analysis. Sometimes you'll agree, sometimes you won't, but I'm not just chasing subscribers. I'm in it for the long term. Okay. Before I get to why I think Harris writing that she wanted to pick Buttigieg and not picking Buttigieg is really revealing, let me first put a big caveat in. Vice presidents don't get a president elected, okay? It just doesn't happen. I know we in the media focus a lot on the VP pick, who's it going to be and who's on the short list, but it really very rarely matters. The last time I can think it mattering was 1960 when JFK picked Lyndon Baines Johnson as his vice president as a way to bring the South into the Democratic fold. But after that, I hear people argue, well, Sarah Palin tanked John McCain. Do you think John McCain was going to beat Barack Obama in 2008 if he had picked the best possible VP nominee? No. Did Palin help? No, of course not. She undermined McCain's message, which was we need a trusted hand on the tiller, and Obama isn't one. Well, picking Sarah Palin revealed that neither was McCain, at least in that regard. Okay, so they matter at the margins, right? But people vote for the top of the ticket. So let's say that Harris had picked Pete Buttigieg. I don't think Kamala Harris would be president right now, but I also don't think she would have lost because she picked Buttigieg. I don't think Harris lost because she picked Tim Walz. I don't think if Harris had picked the person I thought she should have picked, because I thought it was the smartest strategic move, Josh Shapiro, she would have won, right? VPs do not decide presidential elections. Even when the nominee, in the case of a Joe Biden or a Donald Trump, is old, people still vote for the top of the ticket. Okay, so now to why I think this is revealing. And let me just read that Harris quote again. She says about Buttigieg, he would have been the ideal partner if I were a straight white man, but we were already asking a lot of America to accept a black woman married to a Jewish man. Part of me wanted to say, this is the important part, part of me wanted to say, screw it, let's just do it. But knowing what was at stake, it was too big of a risk. So the pro-Harris case here is when she writes knowing what was at stake, which is a second term of Donald Trump, she didn't want to do something that would have guaranteed her losing. I'm not sure picking Pete Buttigieg would have guaranteed her losing, candidly, but that's her argument. My argument, which is less friendly to Kamala Harris, but I do think is borne out over time, is that she is a remarkably risk-averse politician. Now, you don't usually think of that for someone who's been a senator from California, the vice president, and the presidential nominee. You figure, oh, they had to take some risks along the way to get there. Not really in her case. So she had the closest race she ever won and was involved in was in 2010 when she ran for attorney general in California, which should have been a slam dunk for a Democrat, but she didn't run a great race, and it was not a great year to be a Democrat. She won, but narrowly. But after that, she never really had any. She kind of won the Senate by acclamation, and then she ran for president in 2019. Biden picked her in 2020, and then she wound up as the nominee. Like, she hasn't really taken a lot of risks. And I would say if you look at the 2024 campaign, I think one of Harris's big problems was how she ran. I remember coming out of the Democratic convention that year in 2024, a couple weeks in, there was, mid-September, late September, kind of this time last year, there was lots of polling that showed the race to be pretty close, both in swing states and nationally. And yet the campaign that Harris was running suggested, at least to me, as I watched it, that she thought she was ahead by a significant margin, and all she really kind of needed to do was not make any big mistakes and run out the clock. And I remember asking people in her orbit who are or orbit adjacent, like, is Harris's internal polling showing her way ahead, or like ahead by 8 or 10? Because it seems like that's how she's running. And they said, no, actually they have the race really close internally, as well as sort of what the public polling was showing. And so what that made me realize over time in that race was Harris wasn't being cautious and risk averse in that campaign because she thought she was ahead and she just was trying not to lose. She was being cautious and risk averse because she's cautious and risk averse as a person. She is just not someone who is willing to take a few risks, throw a few punches, politically speaking, like try some stuff with the possibility that it might not work. She always wants to sort of stay safe, stay within kind of the safe bubble of accepted political practices. And accepted political practices was you pick a Midwestern governor who was a football coach and could talk to regular people as your VP, Tim Walz. You don't pick a gay man who's married to another man who is from South Bend, Indiana, and has been a mayor before being in the Biden cabinet, right? Like that's the safe pick was clearly, like, if you're deciding between Walz and Buttigieg, was clearly Walz, and that's what she went with. I just think if you look at successful politicians at that national level in both parties, the common thread you see is they are willing to take some risks. I was pointing out Barack Obama, right? He's a first term, second year senator. And he's like, you know what? I think there's an opening. I'm going to take on Hillary Clinton, the biggest name from the biggest family in Democratic politics. Huge risk. Donald Trump, he's probably the least risk. He's the least risk averse president we've ever had. I mean, the guy's this whole life is risk, doing and saying things that other people wouldn't say and throwing caution to the wind, right? So to me, that's worrisome if I'm a Harris supporter in 2028, because I just don't think you change who you are. And I think who she is a cautious incrementalist. And that is not usually what we elect. Occasionally it can be. Biden was sort of a cautious incrementalist, but it came after a 1 in 100 years pandemic. Carter was a little bit of a cautious, Jimmy Carter was a cautious incrementalist, but it came after Watergate, right? So it's like, barring some massive external event, we tend not to pick those people. So again, I don't think Kamala Harris picking Pete Buttigieg wins her the presidency, nor do I think, by the way, it would have lost her the presidency. But I think it is revealing in who she is as a politician. And that is someone who doesn't like risk, doesn't like to leap before they look, even occasionally, doesn't want to take even sort of an educated guess at what might work, doesn't want to throw things at the wall and see what happens. She is risk averse. I think that's a huge problem for her. I think it's limited her political career and her political appeal. I think she ran a way too safe campaign in 2024. And I suspect, although maybe things have changed after that loss, she would probably run a safe campaign in 2028 as well. And I don't think that's what Democrats will be looking for. All right, that's it for me. As I said before, I hope you hit that subscribe button. Independent, authentic. Those are my North Stars. I also hope you like and comment on this video. This is a talker. What do you think about Kamala Harris's decision not to pick Pete Buttigieg? Would it have changed things for the better or the worse? And what does it say about her? Last thing you can do, tell someone in your pickleball club or your bowling league or your mahjong table. Tell them about what I'm doing and why you think it's valuable, and tell them to subscribe. All right, take care.